May 16, 2023. A quiet Tuesday morning in DeKalb, Illinois. Employees at Coal Pallet went about their usual routines, unaware that the walls of their company were about to shake. As office workers logged into their systems, a financial audit was unfolding behind closed doors. One that would expose a betrayal so staggering it left the entire company in shock. By the end of that day, a name would be whispered in hushed conversations. A name that had been trusted, a name that no one ever expected to see tied to one of the largest embezzlement schemes the city had ever witnessed. Passion Moon. This story isn't just disturbing, it will haunt you long after it ends. For 6 years, money had been vanishing from Coal Pallet's accounts. Not all at once, not in an obvious way. It was subtle, a few $1,000s here, a quiet transfer there. No flashing red flags, no alarms, just a slow, methodical siphoning of cash. Until the missing total reached nearly $2 million. The person responsible wasn't a faceless hacker or an outsider breaking into the system. It was someone inside the company, someone who handled the books, processed invoices, and balanced the accounts. Passion Moon had been the company's financial gatekeeper, entrusted with its money, and for years she had been silently stealing it. But money like that doesn't just disappear without a trace. There were vacations, luxury items, bank transfers that didn't add up, and then one day, someone noticed a number that looked wrong, just slightly off. A deeper look revealed another discrepancy, and then another, and then the entire scheme unraveled. What happened next was swift. A full-scale investigation, a warrant executed on Moon's home, an arrest that sent shockwaves through DeKalb. She was charged with theft, forgery, and running an organized financial crimes enterprise. In a matter of hours, the truth was laid bare. The woman they had trusted was living a double life. But what drove her to do it? Was it greed, desperation, a need to keep up appearances? Her husband, Christopher Lyons, had been by her side. Did he know? Was he part of it, or was he just another victim, blindsided by the reality of the woman he thought he knew? The community wanted answers, her coworkers wanted justice, but most of all, everyone wanted to know how she pulled it off for so long without getting caught. This is the horrifying case of Passion Moon. To understand how this all began, we must take a closer look at Passion Moon's life before everything unraveled. On the surface, she seemed like an ordinary woman, living a stable and respectable life in DeKalb, Illinois. She had a career, a marriage, and the appearance of stability, qualities that made her story all the more shocking when the truth came to light. Passion Moon had spent years building a life that many would consider enviable. She was married to Christopher C. Lyons, a man with whom she appeared to share a steady and committed relationship. Together, they lived in DeKalb, a city known for its close-knit community, where neighbors looked out for one another and businesses thrived on mutual trust. It was the kind of place where reputations mattered, where people prided themselves on their work ethic, and where dishonesty was not easily forgiven. Moon was not a drifter or an outsider. She was deeply embedded in the fabric of the community. She had a good job at Coal Pallet, a reputable manufacturing company that relied on strong relationships between employees and management. Her role within the company was one of significant responsibility, handling financial transactions, overseeing accounts, and ensuring that the business's finances were in order. In many ways, she was the backbone of the company's financial operations, a trusted figure who was given unrestricted access to sensitive financial information. This level of trust had not been granted to her overnight. Moon had worked at Coal Pallet for years, gradually earning the confidence of her employers. She was seen as diligent, competent, and reliable, someone who understood the intricacies of financial management and could be depended on to keep things running smoothly. There was no reason to suspect that she would ever betray that trust. To her colleagues, she was a professional, someone who handled money with precision and care. Outside of work, Moon and Lyons lived what appeared to be a comfortable life. They were not ostentatious in their spending, nor did they give off the impression of struggling financially. They participated in community events, dined at local restaurants, and carried themselves with the quiet assurance of people who had built a stable existence. To those around them, they seemed like any other couple navigating the demands of work, marriage, and daily life. But beneath the surface, there were cracks in the foundation of this carefully maintained image. What no one realized was that Moon was living a double life, one that was far more complex and calculated than anyone could have imagined. While she maintained the appearance of a hard-working employee and devoted wife, She was orchestrating something that would ultimately unravel everything she had built. It didn't happen overnight. Her deception began with small, seemingly insignificant transactions, a few dollars diverted here, an adjustment to an invoice there, nothing that would immediately raise suspicion. These initial acts of fraud were carefully executed, designed to slip under the radar, and for a time they did. As she grew more comfortable with her deception, the amounts grew larger. What started as minor misappropriations soon escalated into something far more ambitious. Over the course of 6 years, Moon quietly siphoned money from the company, taking advantage of the trust placed in her. Each transaction was calculated, each move carefully concealed within the financial records she oversaw. And yet, despite the growing scale of her theft, her outward demeanor remained unchanged. She continued to go to work each day, handling financial matters with the same professionalism that had earned her the company's trust in the first place. She carried on with her personal life as if nothing was amiss, never displaying any signs of guilt or concern. Her ability to maintain this dual existence was remarkable, almost as if she had convinced herself that what she was doing was justified. For years, no one suspected a thing. The deception was seamless, the fraud undetected. But trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. And when the truth finally came to light, the consequences would be more devastating than anyone could have anticipated. What drove Pa Hyun Moon to betray the very company that had placed so much faith in her? Was it financial desperation, greed, or something else entirely? To answer these questions, we must look deeper into her motivations, the choices she made, and the moment it all began to unravel. The more money she took, the more confident she became. What had started as small, barely noticeable amounts soon turned into something much more ambitious. Pa Hyun Moon no longer hesitated before transferring funds into her personal account. She no longer second-guessed the unauthorized checks she wrote to herself. What once might have been an anxious, conscious act had now become routine. Each transaction was just another step in a well-oiled machine she had carefully built, a machine that funneled money straight into her hands while leaving little trace of the theft behind. It wasn't just the stolen money that fueled her confidence. It was the fact that no one seemed to notice. For years, the company's finances operated as usual. Invoices were processed, bills were paid, and accounts were balanced. On the surface, at least. Coal Pallet's leadership had no reason to suspect that someone they trusted implicitly was methodically siphoning off their funds. And Moon had made sure of that. She had spent years handling the company's financials, learning the ins and outs of their processes. She knew exactly how to make the numbers work in her favor. Every missing dollar was hidden within layers of legitimate transactions, buried under paperwork that no one had reason to scrutinize. But the money wasn't just sitting in her bank account untouched. She was using it. She had access to Coal Pallet's Amazon account, which she shamelessly treated as her own. Packages arrived at her doorstep, paid for with stolen company funds. What started as small, seemingly harmless purchases grew bolder over time. Household items, electronics, luxury goods, things that should have raised eyebrows if anyone had been paying close attention, but no one was. Meanwhile, her personal life remained outwardly stable, though cracks were beginning to show. Her husband, Christopher Lyons, might not have known the full extent of what she was doing, but something must have felt off. Their lifestyle didn't quite match up with her salary, and yet there were no obvious signs of financial trouble. Money always seemed to be available when they needed it. There was no struggle to make ends meet, no concern about paying bills or affording small luxuries. If Lyons questioned any of this, Moon likely had an answer ready, something plausible, something reassuring. After all, she had been lying for years. Lying had become second nature, but money has a way of changing people. With every transaction, every stolen dollar, she became more emboldened. It wasn't just about necessity anymore, it was about power. The power to take what she wanted, the power to manipulate the numbers, to outsmart those who trusted her. And with that power came a sense of invincibility. She had done this for years without detection. Why stop now? Had she stopped at a few $1,000s, she might have gotten away with it. A discrepancy here or there, an unbalanced ledger that could be chalked up to human error. Small mistakes rarely lead to full-scale investigations, but fraud has a way of catching up, especially when the numbers creep into the 7-figure range. She wasn't just stealing anymore, she was funding a lifestyle. And while Coal Pallet's books may have been easy for her to manipulate, the real world wasn't as forgiving. The numbers didn't lie forever. And whether she realized it or not, the walls were closing in. For 6 years, Pa Hyun Moon had managed to outmaneuver scrutiny, her thefts hidden beneath layers of routine transactions and paperwork. But even the most carefully constructed schemes have a breaking point. The discrepancies were small at first, easy to overlook, but eventually they became too large to ignore. By early 2023, Cole Pallet's leadership began noticing inconsistencies in their financial records, payments that didn't add up, missing funds with no explanation. It wasn't just a mistake or a minor oversight. Something was very, very wrong. The realization sparked an internal audit, and as the company's accountants dug deeper, the full scale of the deception became clear. More than $1 million had been siphoned from their accounts, vanishing into thin air. It was systematic, deliberate. Someone had orchestrated this, and it wasn't long before the evidence pointed to a single individual, the person who had the most access, the one they had trusted for years. Moon had built an elaborate facade, but now it was unraveling. On May 16, 2023, Cole Pallet took their findings to the DeKalb Police Department, officially launching a criminal investigation. Detectives combed through the company's financial records, cross-referencing transactions, invoices, and bank statements. They followed the money trail, and it led them straight to Moon. The fraudulent checks, the unauthorized wire transfers, the personal purchases made with company funds. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. There was no more room for doubt. She had orchestrated one of the largest internal thefts the company had ever seen, and the authorities weren't going to let it slide. 10 days later, on May 25, 2023, law enforcement moved in. Officers arrived at Moon's residence, search warrant in hand. What they found inside only strengthened their case. Documents, receipts, and financial records linking her to the missing funds. There was no way to explain it away, no excuse that could justify the staggering amount of money that had been stolen. That same day she was arrested. The charges were severe. Theft over $1 million, misappropriation of financial institution property, continuing financial crimes enterprise, 3 counts of forgery. For 6 years she had controlled the flow of money, manipulating the system to her advantage. But in an instant it was over. Her world, carefully built on deception, came crashing down. The power she had wielded, the confidence that had once shielded her from suspicion, none of it mattered anymore. She was in handcuffs, facing charges that could put her behind bars for years. And yet, despite the overwhelming evidence, one question still lingered. Why? Why did she do it? Was it greed, desperation, a sense of entitlement? Or had she convinced herself that she would never get caught? As authorities pieced together the full extent of her crimes, the answers became even more unsettling. The truth wasn't just about the money, it was about the choices she made, the risks she took, and the moment she crossed the line from trusted employee to criminal mastermind. And now she was finally facing the consequences. The reality of her situation set in the moment she stepped into the courtroom on May 26, 2023. Gone was the confidence that had once shielded her from suspicion, replaced by the cold, inescapable truth. She was a defendant now, accused of stealing over $1 million from the company that had trusted her for years. The courtroom was silent as the charges were read, each one a reminder of the empire she had built on deception and how quickly it had all crumbled. The judge didn't take her case lightly. Given the severity of the charges and the sheer scale of the financial fraud, her bond was set at $500,000. If she wanted to walk free before trial, she would need to come up with 10%, $50,000, but it wasn't that simple. The court ordered a source of bail hearing, a safeguard against the possibility that the very money she had stolen could be used to secure her release. For the first time in years, Moon found herself backed into a corner with no way out. She had controlled the flow of money for so long, shifting funds without a second thought, but now every dollar she had was under scrutiny. Prosecutors knew how criminals like her operated. They had seen cases where stolen money was funneled through family members or hidden in secret accounts. They weren't going to let that happen. Every financial move she made from that moment on would be examined under a microscope. Her arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Cole Pallet's employees who had worked alongside her for years struggled to process the betrayal. To them, she had been more than a co-worker. She was a familiar face, someone they trusted. How could she have sat among them day after day, knowing what she was doing behind the scenes? The idea that she had been orchestrating a fraud of this magnitude while greeting them with a smile was almost impossible to comprehend. But the most devastating blow landed on her husband, Christopher Lyons. He had shared a life with her, built a home with her, believed in the future they were creating together, and now that future was shattered. The woman he thought he knew had been leading a double life. While he was working, living, and trusting, she was stealing, hiding, and deceiving. At first he tried to process it all, standing by as the legal system took over, but the weight of it was too much. Everywhere he went there were whispers, people questioning whether he had known, whether he had benefited, whether he had been blind or complicit. The scrutiny was relentless, the doubt was suffocating. By August 2024 it was clear there was no saving their marriage. Christopher Lyons filed for divorce, severing ties with the woman who had become a stranger to him. He wanted no part in her legal battles, no connection to the empire of lies she had built. To the outside world, it was the ultimate confirmation that even those closest to Moon had been fooled. But the story wasn't over yet. As she sat behind bars awaiting the next steps in her case, the full extent of her crimes was still being uncovered. Prosecutors were combing through financial records, looking for every missing dollar, every fraudulent transaction, every piece of evidence that would seal her fate. The deeper they dug, the more disturbing the truth became, and the biggest question remained: how did she think she was going to get away with it? As the legal proceedings against Passion Moon unfolded, the gravity of her actions became increasingly apparent. The prosecution, led by Assistant State's Attorney Brooks Locke, meticulously presented the evidence, detailing the unauthorized checks, bank transfers, and personal purchases made using company funds. Each piece of evidence painted a stark picture of betrayal and greed. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Employees from Cole Pallet, who had once considered Moon a trusted colleague, sat in disbelief as the extent of her deceit was laid bare. Their testimonies echoed a shared sentiment of shock and betrayal, highlighting the profound impact of Moon's actions on the company's morale and financial stability. Outside the courthouse, the community grappled with the revelations. Discussions in local forums and social media platforms buzzed with opinions on the case. Many expressed anger and disappointment, questioning how such an extensive fraud could go unnoticed for so long. The case became a cautionary tale, prompting other local businesses to reevaluate their financial oversight practices. As the trial progressed, Moon's defense faced an uphill battle. The overwhelming evidence, combined with her apparent lack of remorse, painted a grim picture. Legal analysts speculated on potential sentencing outcomes, noting that the severity of the charges could lead to a lengthy prison term. In a surprising turn, Moon chose to address the court. Her statement was a mix of apology and justification, acknowledging her actions but attributing them to personal and financial pressures. However, for many, her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the calculated nature of her crimes. The judge, considering the evidence and the breach of trust involved, delivered a stern rebuke. Emphasizing the need for accountability, he underscored the broader implications of Moon's actions on the community and the erosion of trust in local businesses. In the aftermath of the trial, Cole Pallet began the arduous process of rebuilding. The company implemented stricter financial controls and offered support to employees affected by the scandal. The case served as a sobering reminder of the vulnerabilities that exist within organizations and the importance of vigilance. For Moon, the consequences of her actions extended beyond the courtroom. Her personal relationships, particularly with her husband Christopher Lyons, were irrevocably damaged. The trust she had squandered left a void that legal proceedings could not fill. This case stands as a testament to the devastating effects of greed and deception. It underscores the importance of integrity and the fragile nature of trust within communities and organizations. As businesses and individuals reflect on the lessons learned, the hope is that such a breach of trust will serve as a deterrent, fostering a culture of honesty and accountability. If you believe that trust and integrity are the cornerstones of a thriving community, consider subscribing to our channel. Together, let's promote awareness and vigilance to prevent such betrayals in the future.